As usual, I have no clue what the camera is doing, but hopefully it is all good and straight. Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jenny, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my strategy for investing in the US. I'm not a professional financial advisor or anything like that. I'm just a fellow taxpayer and a personal finance enthusiast, if you will. And this is what I like to do. Definitely talk to a professional financial advisor to kind of navigate your own situation or do your own research. For anybody who doesn't want to stay for the entire video, here's a rundown of the steps. The first step is to figure out if your employer offers what's called an employer-sponsored retirement account and contribute just enough that you get the full contribution match from your employer. The second step is to figure out a strategy to pay off your debt, gradually start paying off your debt. The third step is to gradually build up an emergency fund, preferably in a high interest savings account. And then the fourth step is to actively begin investing. Now, I recommend to, first of all, max out your tax advantaged accounts. And the order which I like to max mine out are the health savings account, then my Roth IRA or individual retirement account. And then I like to go back and max out my employer-sponsored plan. So in my case, it's a 401k. And then when you're done all that, when you've maxed out all of the tax-advantaged accounts and you have some money remaining, that is when I would open up a taxable brokerage account and start contributing money there. With no further ado, let's get into a full explanation of these steps. So, like I said, the first step is to figure out if your employer offers an employer-sponsored retirement account and contribute just enough that you get the full employer match. Not all employers offer employer-sponsored plans, but if they do, they often come in the form of a 401k or perhaps a 403b or a 457b. And the type of account that your employer will offer will depend on the type of organization that it is. The names of these different kinds of accounts, 401k, 403b, 457b, come from the US tax code. So that is whatever part of the code those accounts are based on. So just talk to your HR department and figure out what kind of account your employer offers if they offer an employer-sponsored retirement account. Contributions could look like your employer matching a certain percentage of your paycheck. So your employer could say that they'll match up to 4% of your paycheck or 6% of your paycheck, as long as you also put in at least 4% or 6% of your paycheck. Some employers might also offer even more. So they could say that for every dollar that you put into your 401k or 403b, they might offer $2 or even $3 to put into that account. So again, that is something that your HR department can inform you about. The incentive for your employer is that they also get a tax break as a business if they help you to save up for retirement. So that is why some employers will opt to offer their employees this retirement match. It's important to take advantage of these kinds of accounts if you have one available to you, because this is essentially free money that's coming from your employer into your account. So that's a big advantage for you. Employer-sponsored plans will have limited options for what you can invest in. So think of it as though you're walking into a supermarket and there's already kind of pre-existing baskets that you can choose to allocate your money into. Whereas if you were the one that was managing that account yourself, you could pick all of the individual products yourself. So it makes it kind of easy to choose what you want to put your money into, but your options are limited in an employer-sponsored account. When you talk to HR about your employer-sponsored plan, make sure that you also ask about a vesting schedule. To be vested into something means that you have ownership of it. And when it comes to employer-sponsored plans, your employer might say that you are going to be entitled to, let's say, 20% of their contribution after 1 year, 40% of their full contribution after the second year, and then only in the fifth year, you're going to be 100% vested in whatever your employer has contributed. So essentially, this is an incentive for employees to stay longer with the company, because the longer they stay, the more they're going to be vested. Definitely make sure that you ask about a vesting schedule, because it will tell you what percentage you're actually entitled to based on how long you've worked with the employer. There's also a limit as to how much you can contribute individually and combined with your employer every year. Google the limit for whatever year you're contributing to ensure that you don't over contribute, because you can face a penalty if you over contribute to your retirement account. At the time of recording this video, the limit for contributing by yourself to your 401k is $23,000, but combined with your employer, it is $69,000. This is a good point in the video to distinguish between what's known as traditional contributions to a retirement account versus Roth contributions. So traditional contributions are taken before tax, whereas Roth contributions are contributions that you put into your account after tax. So in the case of a traditional contribution, that money would be deducted automatically from your paycheck before tax, and then it would grow completely tax-free all the time that it's sitting in your retirement account. And then when you withdraw, that is when it would be considered taxable income and you will pay taxes on everything in that account. Whereas in the case of a Roth contribution, your contributions are made after tax. So you've paid tax in the beginning when it was deducted from your paycheck after tax. And then that is when everything in that account grows. And when it's time to take it out, that is no longer taxable income. You've already paid taxes on it. So that's why I prefer to opt for Roth contributions wherever I can, because I just want to pay taxes, forget about them, and continue on with my life. Also, keep in mind that the money that you put into a employer-sponsored retirement account is meant for retirement. So that is why the idea is to let that money grow until you're 59 and a half, and that is when you can start taking it out without any penalties. But if you take money out of your account before the age of 59 and a half, it's going to be subject to penalties. If you leave your employer, you can roll any money from a 401k into an IRA, which is a individual retirement account, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The second step is to figure out a strategy to pay off your debt. Now, it's important to have a strategy when figuring out how to tackle your debt, because you want to do it in the most financially optimal way. Some people choose to pay off debt based on whatever will give them the biggest peace of mind, which is also a great strategy to take care of your mental and financial health, but it might not be the best in terms of the numbers. So that's why it's good to crunch the numbers or talk to a professional financial advisor that can help you to look at different scenarios. But for the purpose of this video, let's talk about two different methods that people typically use to pay off debt. And that would be the snowball method versus the avalanche method. So in the avalanche method, you focus on the debts that have the highest percentage of interest associated with them, and you would pay off the loan with the highest interest first, and then move on to the debts that have a smaller interest. So this way you end up paying the least in interest. This is what I was doing when I paid off my student loans and my car loan. And then the snowball method is focused on the balance of the loan. So if you have a loan that is $100, $1,000, and $10,000, you would pay off the one that is smallest first and then move on to the next one and the next one. And the idea behind this method is that it sets a snowball of motivation rolling. Pick whichever method you like best and use that to tackle your debt. The third step is to gradually build up an emergency fund. An emergency fund is exactly what it sounds like. It is a fund that will help you to cover emergencies. And typically this is between 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is the reason why it's really important to track where your money is going and to figure out how much money you need to make it through every month. Some people like to build up an emergency fund that's even bigger than that. I like to focus on investing, so I like to gradually build up my emergency fund, but the most of my money goes towards my investments. But also keep in mind that an emergency fund is going to be different for all individuals. It's going to be personal for your personal finance situation. If you are somebody who needs to feed a family of 4, of course you need a bigger emergency fund than somebody who is living at home with their parents and maybe isn't fully independent yet. I also feel like in the States, an emergency fund is particularly important because there isn't as much of a safety net from the government. So absolutely, when in the States, I think it's really important to have an emergency fund of at least 3 to 6 months of expenses. Probably the most important thing about an emergency fund is to keep it in a high interest savings account. especially one that is online, because online banks don't have the overhead fees that traditional brick and mortar banks have. So definitely open up a high interest savings account. It's just like a regular savings account, but it pays a higher rate of interest. And each month, put a bit of money in there to build up an emergency fund. Now that we have contributed to our employer-sponsored plan just enough to get the full employer contribution, we've also figured out a strategy to pay off our debt, and we've also opened up a high-interest savings account to store our emergency fund. It's time to start thinking about actively investing. I like to max out tax-advantaged accounts first because they offer tax advantages. Look into the different tax-advantaged accounts. This is again where it would be good to speak to a professional financial advisor or do your own research. But the three that I'm going to mention in this list are relevant to my situation, and they'll probably be relevant to a lot of young people out there as well. So the first account that I like to max out after already contributing just enough to my employer match that I need to get the full contribution, is my health savings account. A health savings account is something that can be offered through your employer, or you can even open one by yourself. But in order to qualify for a health savings account, you need to be on what's known as a high deductible insurance plan. So a health savings account is a savings account that is dedicated solely to medical related expenses. The really cool thing about a health savings account is that all of the money that you put into it is completely tax-free. The growth is completely tax-free. And when you take it out, it is also completely tax-free, given that you are spending it on medical related expenses. To figure out if you qualify for an HSA, you can call your insurance company or talk to your HR department to ask if you're on a high deductible insurance plan, and then follow through with the steps to open up a health savings account. The awesome thing about a health savings account is that after the age of 65, you don't have to spend any of the money that you take out of this account on medically related expenses. You can actually spend the money on anything, but it will be considered regular income. So you will have to pay some taxes on it, but you won't have to pay any penalties on it. So one of the strategies that people use when they open up an HSA is they basically use it as a investment account. And they're banking on the fact that after 65, they can use that money towards anything. It will just be considered a regular income and they'll be regularly taxed on it. There's limits every year as to how much you can contribute into an HSA, whether it be individually or as a family. Look up the limits for whatever year you're contributing to make sure that you don't over contribute to your HSA. The next account that I like to max out is my Roth IRA. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a difference between traditional and Roth contributions, and I like to opt for Roth contributions wherever I can because I like to pay taxes in the moment and then forget about the taxes. The Roth IRA is an individual retirement account that is not sponsored by your employer. It is your own account, and there is also a limit every year as to how much you can contribute. The reason why I contribute to this one after the HSA is because it also has tax breaks, but the contribution space is more than the HSA. So I just like to max out my HSA fully because it has a relatively small limit. At the time of recording this, it's around 4,000. Whereas the Roth IRA at the time of recording it is 7,000. So I just go by how much the contribution limit is. Anyway, the idea behind the Roth IRA is also to save up for retirement. That's why it's called an individual retirement account. So that is why it's supposed to be used only after 59 and a half years old. However, if you really need to access money from your Roth IRA, you can take out the amount that you have contributed, so the principal amount, at any time, completely tax-free and penalty-free. Finally, I like to go back and max out my employer-sponsored plan. So I would already have the contributions from my employer, my contributions just to get the employer match. I would have maxed out my HSA, I would have maxed out my Roth IRA, and now I'm going back and maxing out the 401k. The reason why I like to max this one out at the very end is, again, because it has the highest limit between the HSA, the Roth IRA, and the 401k. And also because this account has the most government rules associated with it. So I just like to max out the account with the most rules at the end. Once all of those accounts have been maxed out, that is when I would move on to a taxable brokerage account. So this is just a regular investment account that does not give you any kind of tax breaks, but you can still take advantage of investing. So that's why I like to throw any excess money into there. If you have excess money lying around that you can invest, I think it's great because cash devalues due to inflation, whereas a taxable brokerage account will just continue to grow over the years. Even if you do have to pay some tax when you withdraw that money, it's still growing for you and you're not really doing anything. Some other considerations that I would also look into is if you want to open up your own 401k, if you happen to be self-employed, I would look into a solo 401k. I would also look into a simple IRA and a SEP IRA. This is for people who have their own businesses or side hustles as well. If you happen to have a spouse, I would look into a spousal IRA. If you have children, or if you want to save up for post-secondary education for your children or for yourself or anybody in your family, I would look into a 529 plan. And finally, if you happen to have a disability, I would look into the ABLE plan. Anyways, that wraps up this video. I hope that you found this video informative. Hopefully you have a better idea as to where to take your personal finances. Like I said, do your own research. This is what works for me. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching and take care. See you in my next video. Bye.